This could change everything you think you know about modern medicine. Right now, a powerful new government investigation is being launched into one of the most controversial medical debates of our time. Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has just announced that, if elected, his U.S. Department of Health and Human Services will launch a major investigative study. Its target: the alleged connections between childhood vaccines and the dramatic rise in chronic illnesses. This isn't just political talk. This is a direct challenge to decades of established medical consensus. Proponents call it a long overdue quest for truth. Critics call it dangerous misinformation that will cost lives. Who's right, and what does this mean for the health of your family? Strap in. This is a deep dive you can't miss. To understand why this announcement is a seismic event, we need to rewind the tape. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not a typical candidate. He's built a significant part of his public identity as an environmental lawyer and, more controversially, a vocal skeptic of vaccine safety. For over 2 decades, he has led the organization Children's Health Defense, which has consistently argued that federal health agencies and pharmaceutical companies have covered up data on vaccine injuries. The central tension he points to is a stark statistical correlation. Over the last 30 years, as the childhood vaccine schedule expanded from a handful of shots to over 70 doses by age 18, diagnoses of chronic conditions like autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, autoimmune diseases, and severe allergies have skyrocketed. The medical establishment, including the CDC, FDA, and WHO, states repeatedly that vaccines are safe, effective, and that these correlations are just that, correlations, not causation. They point to better diagnosis and genetic factors. But for a growing movement of parents, activists, and some dissenting scientists, this explanation rings hollow. They see a generation of children who are sicker than their parents were. The stage was set for a political figure to take this debate from the fringes of social media directly into the heart of the federal government. With this pledge, RFK Jr. is doing exactly that. He is promising to wield the full investigative power of the U.S. government to re-examine what he calls one of the greatest scandals in medical history. The controversy isn't just about science. It's about trust in institutions, parental rights, and the very definition of public health. So, let's first understand the position of RFK Jr. and his supporters. What is their core claim? Proponents argue that the sheer volume of vaccines given to children in a short time frame has never been properly studied for synergistic effects. They point to a specific ingredient, thimerosal, a mercury-based preservative that was largely removed from childhood vaccines after 2001, but is still present in some flu shots. They also highlight aluminum adjuvants, used to stimulate a stronger immune response. The argument is that these neurotoxic compounds, injected into immature immune systems, can cause neurological damage and immune dysregulation. Supporters point to a 2013 study from the journal Translational Neurodegeneration, which reviewed animal and human cell studies, and concluded that aluminum adjuvants can trigger adverse neurological and autoimmune responses. They also cite the CDC's own Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or VAERS, which has collected hundreds of thousands of reports of potential reactions, though the CDC cautions this is a passive reporting system that does not prove causation. But their strongest argument isn't just about single studies. It's about a pattern of what they see as institutional corruption. They point to the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, which shielded vaccine manufacturers from most liability lawsuits. Critics of this law say it removed the financial incentive for companies to make the safest possible products. They highlight cases like that of CDC senior scientist Dr. William Thompson, who in 2014 allegedly claimed the CDC omitted data in a 2004 study that showed a statistically significant link between the MMR vaccine and autism in African American boys. The CDC has stated the study was not omitted and that subsequent research does not support a link. But for supporters, this is evidence of a cover-up. Proponents argue this isn't about being anti-vaccine, but about being pro-safe vaccine. They demand more rigorous, independent long-term safety studies, a cleaner vaccine supply, and individual medical freedom. They see RFK Jr.'s proposed HHS investigation as the only way to break through what they call a pharmaceutical monopoly on truth. As one parent advocate told us, we're not conspiracy theorists. We are parents with injured children, and we are being told our lived experience is a lie. But wait, there's another side to the story. The opposing perspective comes from the vast majority of the global medical and scientific community. They argue that the safety of vaccines is not a matter of debate, but one of the most thoroughly verified facts in all of modern medicine. Critics of RFK-Jr.'s plan see it as a politically motivated assault on one of humanity's greatest public health achievements, one that will erode public trust and lead to deadly outbreaks of preventable diseases. Their strongest counter-argument is the sheer weight of evidence. They point to massive, population-scale studies. A 2019 study of over 650,000 Danish children, published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, found no link between the MMR vaccine and autism. A 2013 CDC review of 20-plus studies on thimerosal found no evidence of harm. The Institute of Medicine has conducted multiple exhaustive reviews, consistently finding that vaccines are remarkably safe. Opponents counter that the correlation-causation argument is a classic logical fallacy. The rise in autism diagnosis coincides not just with more vaccines, but with dramatically broadened diagnostic criteria, greater awareness, and older parental age, a known risk factor. They argue that pulling resources into investigating settled science is a dangerous distraction. The real-world impact, they say, is measurable and tragic. They point to the 2019 measles outbreak in the United States, the largest since 1992, which was directly fueled by declining vaccination rates in certain communities. Measles can cause pneumonia, brain swelling, and death. In 2021, the WHO estimated vaccines prevent 4–5 million deaths every year. Furthermore, critics see the very structure of the proposed investigation as flawed and biased. They argue that an HHS study launched under a president who has prejudged the outcome, RFK Jr., cannot be credible. It would, they fear, cherry-pick data and give a government stamp of approval to misinformation. Prominent medical associations have already reacted with alarm. A spokesperson for the American Academy of Pediatrics stated, "This proposal threatens to take us back to a pre-vaccine era where hospitals were filled with children suffering from whooping cough, measles, and polio. The science is clear, and our focus must remain on ensuring all children are protected." The central fear here is that a political debate will override decades of scientific consensus, with children's lives hanging in the balance. So who's right? Let's look at the evidence. Stepping back from the heated rhetoric, what does the neutral data actually tell us? First, the rise in chronic childhood conditions is real and complex. CDC data shows autism prevalence has risen from 1 in 150 children in 2000 to 1 in 36 in 2020. ADHD diagnoses are also up. Allergies and autoimmune diseases are more commonly reported. The key scientific question is, what's driving this? Expert analysis from broad, consensus-driven bodies like the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine repeatedly concludes that the evidence does not support vaccines as a cause. They attribute the rises to a multifactorial mix, genetic predispositions, environmental pollutants like air quality, older parental age, and crucially, vastly improved screening and diagnosis. A child who might have been called quirky or slow 50 years ago is now receiving a specific medical diagnosis. Internationally, the data provides a powerful natural experiment. Countries like Japan and Denmark, which have different vaccine schedules and banned thimerosal earlier, have also seen rising autism rates, suggesting a global diagnostic shift, not a vaccine-linked phenomenon. When it comes to safety data, the numbers are striking. The CDC states that for a given vaccine, a serious adverse reaction might occur in 1 per million doses. Compare that to the disease risks. Polio caused paralysis in 1 of every 200 infected children. 1 in 5 unvaccinated people infected with measles will be hospitalized. The risk-benefit ratio, according to the data, overwhelmingly favors vaccination. However, experts in science communication note one critical nuance most people miss, saying, "Vaccines are safe" is a public health statement based on population-level data. It does not mean zero risk. Just like airplanes are safe but crashes happen, a tiny percentage of individuals may have rare, severe reactions. The VAERS system exists to catch these signals. The scientific process is ongoing. Safety monitoring never stops. But experts note that the current system of post-licensure surveillance has not detected any signal of widespread, long-term harm like that alleged by vaccine skeptics. The data, in their view, is not ambiguous. The reality of this debate is more complex than either side often admits. Here's the uncomfortable truth that gets lost in the shouting. First, the core scientific consensus that vaccines are not linked to autism or a broad suite of chronic illnesses is built on a mountain of evidence that is robust and repeatedly validated. The preponderance of credible data firmly supports the safety and overwhelming public health benefit of vaccination. That is not a conspiracy. It is the conclusion of a global scientific process. However, what most people miss is that the pro-vaccine establishment has often failed in communication and transparency. Dismissing all parental concerns as misinformation or ignorance has been a catastrophic error. For parents witnessing a child regress after vaccination, a temporal association that is searingly real to them, being told it's just a coincidence feels like gaslighting. The 1986 liability shield, while intended to ensure vaccine supply, did create a perception of a protected industry. The medical community has been slow to acknowledge rare but real vaccine injuries, like severe allergic reactions or the very small risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome from certain flu shots. This lack of nuanced dialogue has fueled distrust. The verdict? The science strongly supports vaccination as a net, massive good. But the politics and communication around vaccination have been a failure. RFK Jr.'s proposed investigation is likely a political tool, not a genuine scientific inquiry. But it is a symptom of a deep and justified crisis of trust in public health institutions. Rebuilding that trust requires not fighting settled science, but through brutal honesty about tiny risks, aggressive research into the true causes of chronic disease, and treating vaccine-hesitant parents with respect, not contempt. So how does this affect you, an ordinary person, directly? If vaccination rates fall due to renewed controversy, herd immunity weakens. That means outbreaks of diseases we rarely think about, like whooping cough, mumps, or measles, could hit your child's school. It means vulnerable newborns, cancer patients, and the elderly in your community become more at risk. It could impact public school policies, with more states potentially rolling back vaccine mandates for philosophical exemptions. Insurance premiums could rise with more preventable hospitalizations. On a personal level, it forces every parent into a confusing landscape of conflicting information, where a medical decision feels like a political act. What to watch for next? First, track RFK Jr.'s polling. If his numbers rise, this issue moves from the fringe to the mainstream of political discourse. Watch for responses from major pharmaceutical companies and medical associations. They will likely launch massive public education campaigns. Also, monitor state legislatures for new bills aiming to either strengthen or weaken vaccine mandates. The outcome of this debate won't just be in a lab report, it will be in pediatricians' offices and school nurse stations across the country. So there you have it. A presidential candidate promises a government investigation into vaccine safety, challenging decades of medical consensus. One side sees a crusade for truth, the other sees a dangerous threat to public health. This is about science, trust, and the future of our children's well-being. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Drop a 1 if you believe this investigation is a necessary step for transparency and safety. Drop a 2 if you believe it's a dangerous misuse of authority that will undermine proven medicine. Let's get a debate going in the comments below. Share this with someone who needs to see both sides of this critical story. Subscribe to Kenya News, update today for more breaking news and deep dive analysis.